Cunningham School is offering a grief series. Learn current and relevant information for therapists and families navigating grief. Continuing education units are provided to therapists who purchase. Please enjoy this short excerpt.
Great day. This is Dr. Norja Elizabeth Cunningham, and today we're going to talk about family dynamics while navigating grief. Why did I decide to discuss this particular topic with you? It's actually a topic that's near and dear to my heart due to my own experience with grief starting at a young age. I lost my grandmother when I was about 8 years old, and I also lost a loved one that was very close to me, my father, my biological father, at the age of 10. He passed away from cancer. And since that point, I have lost other loved ones in my life, other choice grandparents, as well as those who were like older mentors in my life, or who you would consider almost like other mother figures in my life. So, with that being said, I have had to navigate loss. And if you have not navigated loss at this particular point or know someone that hasn't, at some point they will. As long as we have breath in our body and we live, there is a point in time where each of us will have to face losing a loved one, whether it's naturally or due to other unforeseen causes. So we all hope that ultimately that we're able to enjoy the time that we have with the loved one, and that we're able to have positive memories that we can hold on to even after they pass, that we can always carry in our hearts. So to begin, we'll start off with what the focus is. So the focus of today's presentation is on families navigating loss of a parent or a spouse. Now, I want to make sure that I clearly define what family means within the context of this particular presentation. And it is a family when there are two parents and a child or children. Now, that can be biological, that can be adoptive, and or choice family. The reason why I say that is because there are people that are in my life currently that are alive, thank God that they are alive and well, but they're individuals that are like parents and or like an aunt or an uncle. So when you have people in your life that are not biologically connected to you and are not lawfully responsible for you and or connected to you as family, they are considered choice family. So I want to make sure that I highlight that. So that means that the people that, or an adult or a parental figure and or a spouse can live in a household, and sometimes they do not. I definitely have worked with a lot of couples as well. I won't go into detail, but just because they are not within the same household doesn't mean that they're still not parenting or co-parenting. So that's the reason why I want to make sure that I'm highlighting that as well. And the family can also include third or fourth generation. So that means that grandparents or grandchildren could actually be involved in this particular dynamic. Why? Because they are a parent and or a child to someone. So every person that is within a family, whether biological, adoptive, or choice family, can find themselves in one of these particular categories, whether it be child and or parent or spouse, and for the purpose of this presentation. So we did an entire presentation just on defining what grief is, but for the beginning of this presentation, I wanted to delineate between grief, mourning, and bereavement. And this particular quote from Gil Julia and Ballester Arnold does a great job of it. Grief has been defined as the process of physical, psychological, and social reactions to the perception of loss. Now, mourning is a cultural response to grief, and like other reactions, is socially and culturally influenced. Finally, bereavement is a state of having suffered the loss of someone close through death. So again, we want to make sure we delineate, because we talked about this last time. Grief has been defined as the process of physical, psychological, and social reactions to the perception of loss, which means you can grieve the loss of many things. Again, we are currently within COVID, and also we are considering the loss of even George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. These are losses. Again, even the perceived loss of, for example, individuals that may not be working where they were and or not working within the same environment that they were working in before, or even the loss of someone not being able to go to a graduation or to not be able to go to a senior prom. These are perceptions of loss. It doesn't mean that it literally had to be the loss of a loved one. Now, mourning is how one responds to grief. And everyone does that differently. For some cultures, it's not okay to cry at the funeral, or at least not to scream and yell and to fall into the casket. But then, depending on the culture, that could be appropriate. Now, bereavement is a state of having suffered the loss of someone close through death. So that means bereavement is specifically connected to the loss of someone that was close to you and them passing away and no longer being present, meaning passing away equal no longer living. It's important that we delineate that, or that we utilize that language. And the reason is because it has to do with developmental stage. I can use a euphemism like passed away for someone who will understand what that means, and or if you're going to make that statement with a child, then just make sure that you clearly state that passing away means that the person has died. They will no longer return. It's almost like they are on a never-ending slumber. Okay. So first, we're going to discuss grief from the perspective of anticipation of loss. And this has to do with anyone that is taking care of an ill loved one up until the point of death or passing. So the caretaker of a loved one is the one who takes care of a family member who has been diagnosed with a terminal and or acute illness. Ultimately, this person takes on the responsibility of providing physical care for the loved one who is ill, and most often picks up the ill family member's responsibilities and roles within the management of the household. So the other spouse or an adult child are more likely to be a caretaker. It is possible for next of kin to be a caretaker, or for family to outsource the caretaking to a professional medical agency. In this presentation, the focus will be on the caretaker being the spouse or adult child, because there are particular ways that people can grieve. And even the grief process itself can happen a bit earlier for those who are caretakers especially. But even for the entire family, once a diagnosis is made, then the family actually begin to grieve at that point. So family members, when they learn of the diagnosis and prognosis, and I want to make sure I clarify, diagnosis is the named illness which is examined for, confirmed, and explained to the family by the medical doctor. Now, the prognosis is the estimated time the ill family member has to live with the diagnosis. The experience of grief prior to the loss of a loved one is called pre-loss grief. Pre-loss grief. Just want to make sure we keep that in mind, because sometimes people think you don't grieve until after the loved one has physically passed away and or has died and has been given a stamp of a date and a time in which they are no longer present on this earth, in their body as well as in their spirit, depending on what your belief system is. But what it boils down to is there is such thing as pre-loss grief. If you already know that the person has passed, is on their way, or going through the transition of passing away, and or expressing signs as to let you know that they are aging in a way where they may pass away at some point, you may begin to consider what that means to have to live and adjust to life with that person. So according to Singer, Spiegel, and Papa, pre-loss grief is a grief process that occurs as someone struggles to come to terms with both the potential loss of a loved one and the changes that result from a loved one's health decline. Pre-loss grief responses can include confusion about one's role in life, emotional distress, and feeling stunned, shocked, or dazed about the illness. So if I'm able to give you an example, there's someone that I know of that has lived a very full and healthy life and is currently struggling with dementia. and to literally know that this person is going through the process of not being able to have activity of their body and or the functioning of their body like they used to can bring about a level of whoa, what's going on, sort of like a shock and a slight almost disbelief, like I can't believe that this is them, because at one point they were very strong and this gentleman was very independent and autonomous in the work that they're doing. And even in some cases, it can bring up some levels of, and when we say emotional stress, meaning thinking about that person, of course, you have positive memories, but then you speak to them and maybe they're not speaking as well as they did previously. Or and when you see them, you're not seeing them in that strong state that they did. So it can bring up some sadness or even concern for them, whether it's for them specifically or maybe even other their spouse and concern for them. And depending on how close you are to them, if it's within your family, then wondering, oh wow, that person was the breadwinner, so what's going to happen now? Or that person always had this particular tradition of what we always did, so what's going to happen now that that person isn't well? And sometimes the family doesn't automatically think about those particular things that that loved one thought about before they actually got sick to the point where they were unable to complete those tasks that once were theirs. So then it now puts a family in a position to really have to face the fact that not only is this illness changing this person's behavior, but it's changing how they are living their lives because that person is so interconnected to the family. So it's possible to experience pre-loss.
If you'd like to learn more, go to www.ainecllc.website today.